You know that feeling, right? You're scrolling through the news, and one day, coffee is a miracle drink. The next day, it's the worst thing for you. If you've ever felt totally lost in a sea of conflicting headlines about food, trust me, you are not alone. So today, we're going to get to the bottom of it. We're going to figure out exactly why nutrition science can be so confusing. I mean, this quote from Stanford Medicine just hits the nail on the head. Coffee, eggs, red wine, chocolate, you name it, and I guarantee you'll find studies that say it's great for you and studies that say it's terrible. It feels impossible to know what to believe. So what is the deal? Seriously, is all the science just wrong? Are the headlines just clickbait? Or is there something, I don't know, deeper going on here? That is the big question we are going to tackle in this explainer. All right, to solve this mystery, first things first, we have to put the science itself under the microscope. We've got to understand how nutrition research actually works. Because, spoiler alert, that's where a lot of these messy, contradictory answers come from. Okay, so let's get right into the biggest culprit. The number one reason for all this confusion is that most of the nutrition studies you read about in the news are what scientists call observational. And that one little word, well, it changes everything.
So here's the breakdown. On one side, you have observational studies. These they observe. They watch large groups of people, ask them what they eat, and see what happens. They can find interesting links or correlations, like, hey, people who eat a lot of broccoli seem to get less cancer. But here's the catch. They can't prove the broccoli caused it. On the other side, you have randomized controlled trials, or RCTs. These are the gold standard. Here, scientists actively intervene. They'll tell one group to eat broccoli and another group not to. This is how you can start to figure out if one thing actually causes another. It's why they're called the key pillar of dependable nutrition science.
The big problem with only showing a link is something called confounding factors. Think of these as hidden variables, lurking in the shadows that can totally mislead the results. Let's go back to our broccoli example. What if the people who eat a ton of broccoli also happen to exercise more, or smoke less, or drink less alcohol? It might be those other healthy habits, not the broccoli, that's protecting them. Those are confounding factors, and they make it incredibly hard to prove it was just the broccoli. And it's not just those pesky confounders. We've got a few other usual suspects. First, let's be honest. People are terrible at remembering what they ate. Can you remember exactly what you had for lunch last Tuesday? Yeah, me neither. So self-reported data is often just plain wrong. Then, of course, there's money. Sometimes the food industry funds research, which can create bias. And finally, think about it. How could you possibly lock 1,000 people in a lab for 70 years and control everything they eat? It's basically impossible. So researchers have to work with the tools they've got. Okay, theory is great, but let's see how this all plays out in the real world. It's time to open our first case file on a food that has been on trial for decades, the humble egg. The main accusation, and I'm sure you've heard this 1,000 times, is that eating egg yolks with all their cholesterol will raise your cholesterol and clog up your arteries, leading to heart disease. This idea was everywhere, and it's why for years people were tossing the yolks and only eating egg white omelets. But here's the plot twist, and this is where the simple headline completely misses the point. It turns out not all bad cholesterol is created equal. There are different types of it. The fat in eggs tends to raise what's called large, buoyant LDL. Think of these as big, fluffy beach balls that don't seem to cause much trouble. On the other hand, things like high-carb diets and obesity raise small, dense LDL. These are like little, dense golf balls that are strongly linked to heart problems. It's a huge difference. And get this. For about 3/4 of the population, for about 75% of us, the cholesterol we eat has very little effect on the cholesterol in our blood. These people are called hyporesponders. Their bodies are just really good at managing it. So for most people, eating an egg barely moves the needle. So what's the final verdict on eggs? Well, this is a classic case of nuance getting totally lost. The headlines scream cholesterol as if it's one big scary monster, but they don't mention the different types or that most of us handle it just fine. And they definitely don't mention that egg yolks are packed with amazing nutrients, like the antioxidants lutein and zeaxanthin, which are fantastic for your eyes. Okay, case closed on eggs. Now let's take everything we've learned and open up another popular and pretty controversial case file, the paleo diet. So, the basic idea behind paleo is actually really simple and, honestly, pretty appealing. It's this thing called the evolutionary discordance hypothesis. The argument goes like this. Our genes were basically set in stone during the Stone Age, but our diet changed overnight with the invention of farming. The premise is that our bodies are just not built for our modern diet and that this mismatch is making us sick. And when you look at this timeline, you can see why the idea is so powerful. I mean, look at that massive stretch of time for the Paleolithic era compared to that tiny little sliver since we started farming. Looking at this, it almost seems obvious that we haven't had time to adapt to grains and dairy. But just like with the egg, the full story, yeah, it's not quite that simple. While the premise sounds super logical, it's built on an assumption that doesn't really hold up to scrutiny. You see, the biggest flaw here is the idea that human evolution just slammed on the brakes 10,000 years ago. It didn't. We have tons of evidence of super fast evolution. For instance, many groups of people evolved the ability to digest milk. Others evolved extra genes to help them digest starches. Plus, there was no single paleo diet. People ate wildly different things depending on where they lived. And the real kicker? A lot of modern paleo foods, like that broccoli we keep talking about, are actually modern inventions. They literally didn't exist back then. So the paleo diet is based on a really compelling story, but it's a romanticized version of a past that was way more complicated. So what's the bottom line here? The crucial point is that in nutrition, things are rarely black and white. There are no simple heroes and villains. The real culprit behind all the confusion is this mix of weak science, media hype that ignores all the nuance, and, yeah, sometimes industry funding. But here's the good news. You don't need a PhD to see through the noise. You just need a simple toolkit. So next time you see a crazy nutrition headline, just ask yourself these 4 questions. 1. What kind of study was it? Just observational? 2. What are the confounding factors? What else could be causing this? 3. Who paid for it? And 4. The golden rule you should tattoo on your brain. Correlation is not causation. A link is just a clue. It's not the final answer. So it makes you wonder, what if the healthiest diet isn't a list of good foods and bad foods at all? What if in this world of constant nutritional noise, the absolute best approach is actually just a way of thinking? You know, being curious, being a little skeptical, and always looking for the real story behind the headline. That right there might just be the most powerful nutrient of all.